is.
People.
Perfect timing, Mikaela.
Yay, yay. What up, what up, what up? Hey, Mikaela. Nice to see you.
It's an honor.
Oh, look at your candle.
Oh my goodness, everything's looking good over there.
Fire back there. I'm gonna have to turn my fireplace back on.
Whoa. He has a lot of plants.
Lots of plants.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're plant people, right?
Yeah.
Were you waiting?
Plant fungus people.
Were you? Oh, look, we got 18 folks. Amazing.
So good.
Let's see. We got Amy. Dennis is here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dennis Walker, the micropreneur.
Oh, my homie.
Are you in your Speedos, bro? Hopefully. Jess Pine, my lovely partner.
Aww.
Jessica Kaming, all the way from Colorado.
Ooh.
Rachel Flower.
Oh, we were feeling so sad no one was here. There we go.
Made it. I spoke to Toinette yesterday. She's over in Connecticut. Thanks for making it. Megan Spence, that name looks really familiar. Awesome.
Maybe everyone can drop in the chat like where they're coming from.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. What would you like to do, Mikaela? I usually ask like drop a name and where you're from, what you're doing, one epic thing that you've done this year.
Ooh, that's
one epic thing. But Mikaela, what would you like them to?
Yeah, I'd love to ask where people's ancestors are from.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, where are your people from? What neck of the woods, what neck of the world was your blood from? Where's your people from? I think that gives us a really cool idea for the ancestors that we are hanging out with in the space.
Yeah. Well, you and I definitely share some ancestors in Sicily.
Oh, yeah.
Martello is my Sicilian side of the family, my mom's side. I'm Alfredo Martello. He'll be 98 March 1st.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Born in 1925 in the north end of Boston, and his parents, Vincenzo and Angelina Martello, emigrated through Ellis Island after Mussolini took down Italy, and they had a sponsor in the north end of Boston. If you've ever been there, it's where all the Italians hang out. And he was born four years later in Mass. So
it's a gorgeous story. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah. Let's see. I'll read what some others have to say. That's a great question. I love that.
Yeah. I'm curious where Dennis's ancestors are from. I know a little bit about Dennis, but not a lot about his ancestors.
In the cosmic debris of Galactica.
White people.
We got Megan Spence, Santan Valley, AZ. Jesse H. from Washington told me about this. Awesome. Cool. New Orleans, LA, Louisiana, not LA, from the 1600s.
Wow, that's cool.
Paisan, Southern Italy, Russo, and also Ireland, Fitzgerald, Dennis Walker, white people, Scotland probably. I'm going to say some Germany, some English, Irish, Guyano. Hopefully I said your name correctly. Andean Mountains in Colombia. Amy Steinberg, she is a team member, Reno, Nevada, Hungary. Rachel Flower, nice to have you here, Rachel. Anglo-Saxon, UK. Jessica, hi, Italy. Jean-Paul, Mergich. Oh, hey, Jean-Paul. So stoked to be here, myself and my partner, Sarah, another Mashi Mama, tuning in from the North Shore of Kauai. Awesome. My ancestors are from Europe, Middle East, and Northern Africa, as far back as I can track. Same for Sarah. Megan, Norway, Ireland, Denmark, white AF. I love that you guys can really just, get into this. This is going to be such a fun conversation with Mikaela. Felicia Dawson, Atlanta, Georgia, Birmingham, Inter, Alabama, West Africa, and then Andrea Swartz tuning in from the snowy mountains of California. We're in the snowy mountains of California. I'm in the snowy mountains of California too. Tahoe. I wanted to hear you say that. That's where I am. I'm North Lake Tahoe, the Washoe County, Washoe Territory, as well. And Andrea is Truckee. We like to call Truckee East Marin County now, with all the whiteness that's coming in with their Silicon Valley tech money. It used to be a rough and tough cowboy town back in the day, Truckee, California. So amazing. I'm so happy to have Mikaela de la Myco here. Sorry, everybody, if you're waiting in the waiting room. We had some Zoom tech challenges. As an old Israeli friend of mine used to say, like a Swiss watch, right on time. So thank you for being on time. Anyone in California, if you weren't on time, you're on time, because we're on California time, and it's just kind of like whenever we just show up. So thank you all for being here. We have a really amazing conversation, not so planned for you. I have some questions, and I have a lovely guest. And this is my first time meeting Mikaela. I've obviously seen a lot of your content out there and know of your work. Dennis speaks very highly of you as well, and the greater mycelial network out there doing the good work. And thank you all for joining. And without further ado, we're going to get into some questions. I'm going to introduce Mikaela. And if you have questions will come up. If you want to, just drop them in casually in the chat, actually in the Q&A section, and I'll make some time for questions at the end. And Mikaela, all questions are welcomed.
Yeah,
to an extent.
absolutely.
Just get creative, and things will come up as we talk and we flow here. And how about it's mid-afternoon on a Wednesday. How about we all just close our eyes and just like drop in real quick to the ground in wherever you are. If you're in the comfort of your own home, your desk, your office, your couch, your car, wherever you might be. Some deep breaths in through the nose, relax the jaw, sit up straight, get that spine straight so we can just tune in to what we're going to receive today. Maybe the roof of your mouth has your tongue pinned to it. Relax that. And just give yourselves a pat on the back for making time out of your day to educate. And I am going to share my gratitude with you all for being here. And then whenever you're ready, we'll just come back into the Zoom room. Just hang out there for a sec. And my teammate said, drop questions in the chat to everybody when you're ready. Okay, if y'all want to keep hanging out wherever you're hanging out, that's fine. I'm going to get on with it and introduce Mikaela de la Myco. Mikaela de la Myco was born into a first-generation Italian, Afro-Caribbean, and indigenous Mexican family who lived in unceded Tonva territory, Los Angeles. Her education comes from years walking the paths of sacred intimacy work, temple arts, circle keeping, Mexica ceremony, and womb care facilitation, all under the care of teachers and guides. Mikaela now practices in occupied Oila in Cumyay territory, San Diego, as a mushroom matriarch. She creates much needed education and spaces for unmet populations in the psychedelic renaissance. Her primary focus is holding community-based circles where people can journey through the dark Emineta to uncover their ancestor codes, explore and rewrite trauma wounds, and make meaning with mushrooms and other earth medicines. And Mikaela, did I say kum yai correctly? I know there's a couple pronunciations of that. And ko'ila, if you would like to correct me, please do for everyone else's sake.
Sure. So the Inland Empire territory in Southern California here is the Cahuilla territory, and that stretches from like San Bernardino to Temecula region. And then we have the Kumeyaay territory, which is much of the North County, San Diego, down to central San Diego area.
Thank you. And I have no shame saying that I was on YouTube learning how to pronounce that correctly before I jumped on this. So
I'm really
thank you
glad
for yeah. Okay, let's get in some questions. How's everyone feeling? How are you feeling, Mikaela? Good?
There's just so much to be grateful for. I'm mostly happy to be rooting back at home. I had been traveling from the end of January to mid-February, and so I'm just really happy to be back with my family. And that was the longest I'd ever spent away from my son, who's 3 now. So that was, yeah, that was really big for us, but he seemed to do really well, and we've felt like much closer, even just even the last couple of days have been like feeling close again. So that's been really sweet and nice. And there's a lot to be excited about, lots of things happening. So yeah, I'm just grateful for my life, and I'm grateful for what the entheogens have like allowed me to experience in this life, because I did not have such a great experience when I was younger. So just happy to be talking to you, and happy to be talking to these great people here.
Amazing. And just for when I get into the questions, if there are moms in the audience, let us know. I think that's good. I know there's a few moms in there. All right. So first of all, define your relationship with microdosing. While you've spoken to microdosing for broadcast news and Harper's Bazaar and Red Table Talks, you've spoken out about the issues with the concept of the microdosing mom. If you could speak to that, that would be great.
So I've run some clubhouse rooms called Not a Microdosing Mom, and I think for a particular reason. The microdosing mom is a attempted cultural trope, and I think the cultural trope really limits the scope of what entheogenic parenthood really has to offer, and really the way that it is practiced by people that I know and people that have lived on the planet for a lot longer than I have. And the reason I stand up against being a microdosing mom is because the assumption with what microdosing is a consumptive practice of taking small bits of any substance, entheogenic or otherwise, at a sub-perceptual dose for a period of time for greater wellness and prosperity of the self. And there's a couple of things that I really feel miss the mark as far as what the scope of culturally entheogenic mothers can be and do and who they are. And I think the most pronounced of those issues is the way that the media portrays the microdosing mom as just this this particular kind of person, that it's the mom that is maintaining all semblances of traditional social structures and is just taking a tiny little bit of medicine and is functioning the same way that mom should function, however, doing it with a bigger smile on their face and more efficiency, and getting the kids to soccer practice. And look at the look at the regular Lululemon mom who just so happens to also be eating mushrooms. And I think that trope is just so boring and tired. And I've even seen articles with the Harper's Bazaar article say the title was Microdosing Moms, the New Wine Mom. And I think that really just was despicable. And I love the reporter who spoke on it. And I know that was not her choice to make, but that is what the mass media consciousness really can relate to, is the mom is all of the regular things the mom is, except is taking a little bit of mushrooms, and nothing is changing and nothing is different. And it's so far from what is really happening and what a lot of moms are today in relationship to medicine are medicine women. Like, there are people that are not just eating the mushrooms, but they're also cultivating the mushrooms. They're also leading ceremony with the mushrooms. They are also teaching their children about entheogens. And so I just feel that this microdosing mom trope is really limiting in the grand scope of things, and honestly really belittles the importance of the relationship that moms are discovering with the entheogens. And truthfully, consumption is just one side of it. For me, what this evolution is doing is it's helping to rematriate psychedelics, which is so much of what I do stand for. So if I don't stand for the microdosing mom, what do I stand for? I stand for the rematriation of psychedelics, which means that mothers are in leadership positions within the psychedelic movement, because mothers are the people that are here to educate, have always been here to educate, and also be the providers, the supporters, and the change makers within the psychedelic movement. So that's why I'm not with the microdosing mom, because it pigeonholes the role of mothers within the psychedelic movement and ignores their real role and the real opportunity that they have to take a tremendous and hold a tremendous amount of power in the space.
Thank you. And comparing it to the new wine mom.
I know, gross.
It's just very limiting. There's a lot more depth there that we could probably spend, another hour speaking about that whole comparison. So are mushrooms, fungi different from plants? And do you work with them differently? I think we know the answer, but let's hear it from Mikaela.
Yeah, they are in a different kingdom of organisms. They function and operate very differently. They have a different sensory system. They do not all fungi, but some fungi and most fungi don't use photosynthesis, whereas plants do use photosynthesis. But there are a myriad, millions of species, hundreds of thousands of different species of mushroom, and hundreds of thousands of species, millions of species of different plants, and they have comparable ways, and they have differing ways. And for me, when I, operate in this place with plants, I find that plants have a different feature around their constituents and aromatics. So for me, plants have a sensory-based quality. They have volatile oils, for example, that usually mushrooms do not have. And volatile oils and terpenes are what are giving the characteristics of different plant, like their benefits and things. And there are different chemicals inside of fungi that are giving them their characteristics. So I'm also a folk herbalist. And so I learn from plants by being with them, by hearing stories about them, by spending time with them. And I learned about the mushrooms in the same way. So we can approach folk herbalism, and we can actually approach, let me reframe, we can approach entheogens and learning about entheogens from a folk herbalist perspective, which is in experiential learning, in learning from elders, and learning, and not just like, elders that we might not have access to, but elders in the space. Even someone like Dennis, learning through storytelling, I think is also a really cool approach to learning about mushrooms and plants alike. And so I find that although these our non-human relatives are a little bit different, we can take similar approaches to learning about both of them. And we can use, and what I love to is employ like my senses as far as spending time with them. So a lot of the people that are microdosing today are just coming in contact with like a capsule, or they're just coming in contact with like a gummy bear or something that's like so far removed from their actual form. And so what I really like to impress on people is experience mushrooms in a variety of ways that engage your sensors and your sensory awareness. Like smell the mushrooms, try them wet. Most people only try them dry. You can have access, try them wet, smell them, lay with them, bathe with them, do all kinds of different things. And these are all things that I do with plants. So I like to approach them in similar ways, but recognize them as intrinsically different for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, building a relationship with their plant
Yeah.
allies and fungal allies. And it just made me think of how you wanted to learn where everyone's ancestors were from, because there is that lost art of storytelling. And our ancestors traditionally would pass down the storytelling and get that um, folk, science or folk herbalism down and passed down to the next generation. So I'm glad you brought that up, because there are people that all of a sudden there's like, oh, mushrooms it's just the new thing, right? It's been around for thousands of years, or cannabis. It just became legal in California in 2018. And it's like, no, it's been around for thousands of years. So let's start paying attention and being a bit more mindful to how we approach these medicines. So thanks for sharing that.
And thank you for saying that, because what the model or the worldview that I'm watching psychedelics kind of move into is this like academic model, this like bachelor's, master's, PhD certification kind of lateral um, or vertical movement, right? This movement towards specificity. And I think that's great within a medical context. And also, who's to say that mushrooms or herbs are strictly medical or like deserve to be pressed into that model when we educate mothers and the heads of families, you can have access to that level of knowledge at such a folk level that there could be psychedelic literacy in just a few generations if you brought back that continuity of learning at a folk level. So I feel like we don't need to make entheogenic knowledge exclusive to people who have access to academia, because that really just isn't fair at all.
Well, we know how the military, industrial, academic system likes to work. So it's very reductionist in that way. And I think a lot of people that I know in this Zoom room here would agree that there's a lot more to it than just pigeonholing it into a scientific reductionary standpoint. So
Really?
I think we're going to get more into that with the questions I have, and the next one is how can mushrooms aid in families and childcare, and what use models do you gravitate towards in your practice?
Thank you so much. I I really find that supporting mothers, supporting family members and caretakers with mental health assists family structures. And a lot of folks that have just come out of a postpartum experience, for example, don't have a lot of options as far as um, beneficial earth-based materials in order to address the needs of their changing chemistry and biology. And so for me, I really like to approach like the postpartum period, for example, as a really crucial and critical time to focus and pay attention to the mental health of the mother, the emotional health, the physical health. And so it's in that place that I really like to offer or support people with bringing mushrooms into their practices or other entheogens, for example. I find that a lot of the mothers that I do care for have very young children, and I'm moving into a phase where my child is now getting a little bit older. He's 3, he's a toddler, and so what I'm starting to see as a potential model that has been really beautiful is that the people around him and the people that are in our home, they have an entheogenic relationship. They have relationship to entheogens. So almost all his caretakers, almost all the people who babysit him are psychedelically literate. They have this concept for preparation, ceremony, integration. That is a big part of their lives. And so that really changes the way that they approach my child. If they have an awareness for entheogenic practice and recognizing that people are emergent, people do not operate within schedules or always linear time, that we are cyclical beings, that we are emergent beings. They look at a tantrum and they don't immediately pathologize. they allow the needs of the child to inform how they need to respond, as opposed to what their agenda is being enforced onto the child. So I really see within the care that my son gets, that entheogens have affected and impacted the way that we're all approaching him. And I think that is a general positive. And so for me, maintaining an entheogenic cadence to our lives, I journey at least 4 times a year. And that's just on my own personal. I'm usually doing these journeys on the solstices and the equinoxes or sometime around. And we have community members that are a part of that. So sometimes we'll be journeying in the home, or sometimes we'll be journeying somewhere near the home, and other, those folks will be coming to our home, and we'll be integrating in our shared space. My son is present and involved for a lot of these conversations. So he sees kind of the cultural remnants and like the what are the adults doing? We are listening. He's involved. He knows the people that are journeying. They are his uncles and his aunties. And so I think, bringing him in to the cultural landscape in which entheogens are being consumed is also an important part of the family care system. We don't just talk about, oh, mommy just ate mushrooms and like now we're gonna go to the farmer's market or whatever. Like that's all fine and good. And I think within the microdosing mom model, but a reverence for like ceremony and ritual is something he's already become accustomed to because we include him in those experiences. And that cultural knowledge is really important. I would say sometimes even more important than just us ingesting, but the framework for which the ingestion takes place is really important. So that has completely augmented his care, and my ability to have a piece about myself, to be able to have worked through a lot of my triggers and the things that annoy me and the way that I respond to him in my life have been completely helped by not just mushrooms, but also cannabis and also ayahuasca and also peyote and San Pedro. So really grateful to know that, LSD and MDMA are parts of my care system for my son. Because if I'm working through my things, I'm staying connected with his father, I'm staying connected with the community members. We can all really care for him in a better way. So collective mental health of all of the caregivers that have contact with my son is really important. And that mental health is very much supported by psychedelics and entheogens.
I was just writing a note down there: collective mental health, psychedelic literacy. Those are the big terms that jumped out at me. And then boiling it down, sound like you've formed a very amazing community for your son and yourself in the larger context of the people that you trust to be around your son on entheogens. You mentioned peyote, and I'm part of a peyote community here in Northern California, and I've been to 2 baby blessings for Phil and Demetra, and Phil is a roadman as well. And in their wedding, while she was 8 months pregnant with Cypress, and Cypress is 4, and Solana is she's just turned 3 actually. So it's a very amazing community to be able to witness children in a teepee, and while medicine is getting passed around, and it's conducted, obviously, if anyone's been in a peyote ceremony with the Native American church and the Lakota tradition, it's very structured. There's no, running around and getting up and leaving the teepee to go stretch and get some fresh air and go pee and all the things. But children in the teepee is just it's just a magical occurrence. So it's wonderful to hear you're doing the same with all kinds of other medicines too. So yeah.
Yeah, we generally hold mushroom sits, and sometimes those sits also include cacao or MDMA, and we'll do maybe more than one night or a single night. And I find that, yeah, the children are very much there. We usually sit with children in arms. Toddlers are a little bit different, especially in the presence of psilocybin. It's a different kind of medicine. And so usually my son is present for like just leading up to drinking, and then he comes in the morning for integration and helps us with integration. And yeah, he's aware of what the rattles are for and like how the feathers are helpful for people. And he has language around how is ceremony, and he's really tertiary the experience. And yeah, to be truthful and honest, I think a lot of parents also struggle with those shared values among all the community members. Like the way one person parents is a different way than another person parents. And in my own relationship now, my fiance and my son's father is not really down for Martin to start eating mushrooms yet. And at this age, he would be ready to begin his journey with them. And so I think there are some real like cross-cultural implications too. And something I even found with some friends in the peyote church and the Native American churches, sometimes the mother and the father would feel like called to bring their children to meeting. And this was like all kosher and good. And then if the family broke up or if the mother left the father, sometimes the knowledge of the children being involved in ceremony would be like used against the mother, for example, to keep her away from her children. So this is also like a very real thing that a lot of us are, dealing within our own communities, as like cross-cultural or like interracial relations where cultural standards are really different. And so I noticed a lot of folks in here are like European, and the tribes of Europe were lost long ago, and some of the entheogenic family practices of European folks aren't as like present and maintained today because of assimilation to American culture. And they might look at you or the people that you're friends with and me and my people and see that, oh, you bring your kids to ceremony? That's like so dangerous. Like, how could you do that? Or why would you do that? And I'm glad that you have a really beautiful perspective, because actually watching it happen, you can really see how safe the children are, and you can see how safe and adored and loved the experiences are and can be, and how attuned that these kids really are born as. And so thank you for sharing your story, because I think that's part of the frontier that we're on, and part of trying to reestablish the cultural context for entheogens. Because yeah, everyone's ready to talk about a microdosing mom, but not a lot of people are ready to talk about children at ceremony yet.
I'd rather just see children at ceremony than children in a bar.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
a recovered alcoholic, addict, and it was like, be just that's normal. It's normalized, right?
totally.
Drinking, and we can get there. But you really answered, I believe, this next question I had, if you wanted to just add anything to it. But your work at times draws from a lot of applied spiritual traditions, basically magic, for those exploring both plant medicine and magic as they heal and raise children. How should they approach it if they're just starting out, and how important is mentorship? You touched on a lot of it, but if there's any other finishing touches you'd like before we move on to the next one, that would be great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, a lot of people don't talk about entheogens and magic because it's like kind of niche and woo-woo, but I think it's really great that you brought this forward. Like you were talking about this like reductionist scientific mind state that was like forced even on European people during the 16th century, during the witch trials and the witch hunts. This experience of the magical world is ancient. It is our relationship to nature. It is the animism of all of the things. It is it's deplatforming humans as the most important life being on Earth, and reestablishing our relationship to all of the ecology, right? It's making ourselves less important, and recognizing that like the plants and the animals and the stars and the planets and the dirt under our feet are just as sentient and important and alive as we are. And so I think that's what psilocybin has really taught me and helped me to resituate myself in within a magical world, is that I'm magical and so is everything else. And that has brought to me, I think, within the child and the family question, is that when I kind of come back to that kind of brain, that everything is magical and I am magical, and like we are living in a magical reality where time can, line up in just such a perfect way. Like you said, we're right on time, and where like circumstances and synchronicity and all these things that I think come really early on in a person's spiritual enveloping. What's magical is that kids already have this. Kids already are at this space. And so for me to be able to return to that and have that as part of my waking life always, because mushrooms have allowed me to kind of like shut down certain parts of my mind that aren't that important and reanimate and reimagine and reignite these imaginative places, then I can actually look at the world the way that my kid does, and relate to them in a better way, and maybe relate to other people in a better way too, by recognizing the shared humanity and the shared spirit and the shared beauty. And as far as magical practice goes, what I really like to help people remember is that access to a person's own ancestry is very important as far as cultural competency goes. There's a lot of interesting and beautiful things that elders are doing in their own traditions, and that does not necessarily mean that their traditions need to become our own. May they be a shining light for us, right? May they be a lighthouse for us to want to find our own way in our own spiritual traditions and our own spiritual practices, and finding our own relationship with our ancestral magic ways. So I really hope that the people listening, or that anyone here in the space, can actually find some value in their own bloodline and like in their own wandering of the earth, and that there is also a richness in that perspective, and that there is a richness in these frameworks and cosmologies, and that everyone is indigenous in their own way and has their own magic system that they can follow and make robust.
Wow. Thank you for that. It was amazing. Just personally, my favorite byproduct or benefit of psychedelics are just the deeper connection with nature and the younger version, spawn of consciousness of little Brian, and thinking about like how Brian got here, and wait, how did my dad get here? How did my mom get here? How did my grandma, right? And like going all the way back, but traveling those dimensions in the natural world. And nature is happening all around us at all times, right? These plants behind me are growing. I can't see it, right? They just are. I've been gone for 4 days in my house, and I came back and I saw these new little like shoots and the plants, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is just amazing, right? So getting back in the cycles of nature, I like that you talked about doing a journey on the solstice, the equinox. Those are, I fast on those time periods on the calendar, 90 days, 12 weeks, what, a quarter, whatever you want to call it. But the equinox is coming up in almost about a month from today. Yeah. So getting in the cycles and the rhythms of nature is something that you can't really put into this scientific chart, right? Or protocol, right? I like that you use the word journey, because that's what it is. It's a journey. Like life is a journey. Nature is a journey, and it's happening all around us at all times. So thank you for touching on all of that. And nature is magic, right? Just, it is. Go outside and stare at a tree, and leave your phone inside and just stare at a tree and watch what it does. Watch the sky, watch the clouds, watch all of it. So amazing. So in the ABC8 interview, you showed a micro cacao sauce. I can taste that. We at Medicine Box place food in our 7-pillar model of wellness, along with mindfulness, community, collaboration, nature, and recovery, as well as music. And what other foods mix well with these preparations, and which ones don't?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that. And I really do feel, in the way that I like to sit and situate medicine is in what I call like the symphony of medicines. So yes, we might be centering one medicine. Maybe the healing or the primary is coming from psilocybin. However, it is like within this like cacophony and this like giant crescendo of many other helpful and beneficial non-human relatives that might come from animal or might come from plant, but at the same time, like they are so interdependent. So food and foodways, I think, are a really important part of a person's general well-being. And when I say foodways, it's not just like this is the food I'm eating, but it's also the food I'm preparing. It's also the food and the way that I'm preparing it, and the way and my relationship to it growing, it being harvested, it being processed, it being made, me eating it. So that's like really where I like to bring a lot of attention to, is like any medicine work, any food way, it's not just about consuming it. How do I consume it? I want to consume consent, like intentionally. It's like, can you create with it? Can you? And that's, why I put out these little videos of, what I craft, because I really want to position people from a space of consuming to a space of creating with medicine. So the honey cacao paste is a gorgeous offering, and something that I learned about honey in particular. So honey is particularly congruent and harmonious with the sacred mushroom, and for a lot of different reasons I'm not going to get into, but one of the reasons is that honey can preserve mushrooms. And so if you are looking to keep a hold on your mushrooms, preserving them in honey or floating them in honey can keep them for a lot longer. And some people, they do a technique called blue honey, where they will take honey and then dump mushrooms inside and like let it sit for a really long time. But in my experience as an herbalist, glucose and sugar is not a very good solvent for most of these constituents. So the honey is not going to contain a significant amount of psilocybin within it. You'll actually need to eat the mushroom for that. So what I do is I blend the honey, or I blend the mushrooms and put it in the honey, scoop the honey and eat the totality of it. And this comes from a very like old school way of eating fresh mushrooms, where the Mexica people and the Azteca people would take raw, wet, fresh mushrooms and dump them into a really special wasp honey. And instead of swallowing the mushroom whole or chewing it down and pushing it and digesting it through your gut, they would macerate the mushrooms in their mouth and allow like the juice of the mushrooms to come out and let it be digested in through the roof of their mouth and receive the psilocybin, which is small enough to cross the blood-brain barrier of your mouth, and completely bypass like the gastrointestinal system, which I think is like genius. So digesting mushrooms through the mouth is something that is not happening with microdosing, because everyone is just taking a pill and swallowing it and is missing the sensory, missing the sensual, missing the food part of mushrooms. So honestly, I think more than adding food to mushrooms, I think it's also recognizing that mushrooms can be food, and mushrooms can be tasted, and mushrooms can be experienced through the mouth, and is really important. Other things that people, often connect foodways with mushrooms is cacao, which is very important for a lot of different reasons. And cacao is also very sacred medicine, but generally it was never really combined. It was actually drank before the mushrooms. So the cacao would be drank. That is vitalizing the body with helpful constituents and micronutrients to sustain the body energetically for the very long mushroom journey ahead, and also to remineralize what would be lost when the mushrooms were processed by the body. So the body takes a lot of minerals in order to process mushrooms, and in the mushroom experience, there's a lot of caloric burning from the brain. There's also a lot of minerals that are zapped out of that experience. And so the cacao actually kind of prepares the body for that physical load that the mushroom journey will, help us to experience, and what it will use in order to experience. So honey and cacao, this is why I like to lean on honey and cacao for these reasons. And also what I kind of found interesting was I was following a bit of like a dieta before. I was kind of approaching the mushroom practice like I was going to approach ayahuasca, where I was like going to eat really bland food or like fast or like stay really, like limited in my food consumption. And what I noticed is I would feel really weak after journeys or like really burned out or tired or not very strong. And as a space holder, I need to be up all night long and singing songs and tending to people. So how was I going to stay energized? And something that you might notice in the peyote churches, they have the buffalo blessing, right? They'll bring like the buffalo in. And so I'm actually noticing more and more that it is okay to eat meat in conjunction with preparing or integrating mushroom experiences. And that really surprised me because I was coming out of veganism and Dr. Sebi stuff, and it's like meat is the devil or whatever. And, I totally get all those things. And I'm also recognizing that there is a huge exchange, carne for carne, like there's a huge exchange that's happening when we relate to these bigger animals. And so if we can find access to like really well-tended animal foods, we can feel really nourished in our journeys and in our microdosing experience. And microdosing experiences and even high dose experiences can take a tremendous body load. This is a lot of processing. This is a lot of trauma that we're working through, and feeling strong and being a mother and being nourished is the most important thing that we can be in our family. So, foods that mix well with mushrooms, I'm not saying like eat a steak like during journey, but what I noticed is like having a couple bites of like grass-fed beef jerky like leading into ceremony gave me so much vitality, so much energy, and so much stamina for me to continue to hold space for myself and hold space for other people.
Muy fuerte.
It's important.
Yeah.
It's important to feel strong. Yeah, absolutely.
I like that you mentioned the maceration of mushrooms. That's exactly how I like making a pouch. My friends are like, dude, that's, oh man, how do you do that? It's like, no, that's from taking like sublingual tinctures for many, many years. It's like, bioavailability through the mucous membranes in the mouth. That's the best way to get the medicine in there and bypass that second pass metabolism in the liver, right?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up because a lot of people do not know that. And something that my friend brings up a lot, she's an amazing herbalist that talks about like flying ointments. And this is kind of not a PG conversation, but I think, if we're going to talk about motherhood, like let's talk about how babies get here in the first place. Flying ointments are ointments made with entheogenic materials to be used in the orifices of the body. So like the armpits, sublingually, and also the mucosal membranes of like the labia. And so back in the day, when like witches and this like kind of broomstick thing, this iconography around flying witches really had to do with creating these ointments that were entheogen laced. So it's funny you said amanita instead of amenta, and it's cool that the two words are so similar. They would use amanita and other entheogenic medicines and make like a oil, and then they would put the oil on a broomstick or some kind of other like wooden applicator, and then they would rub it into like their labia, and it would be absorbed through the mucous membrane of that part of their body, and bring them to a celebratory bliss like state. And so this is where we get like the trope of the flying witch is they're literally flying on Amanita muscaria mushrooms that has been absorbed through their mucous membrane in their labia. So another way of interacting with entheogens, and my friend literally says like being penetrated from them, by them in these other ways that have nothing to do with your digestive system. So thought I would offer that as well.
Hey babe, are you still there? You take some notes on that? Just making a joke here. We can laugh, right?
Yeah,
she's an aspiring sexologist, by the way.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Yeah, please. And that's what me and Dennis talked about was like psychedelics and sensuality and intimacy. And I feel like also within this like medical model, it's hard to talk about those things.
Yeah, it's like taboo, right?
It's not embodied.
We can't talk about that, right? Like, no, it's this. So just trying to make a good laugh, everybody. Hopefully that laughed. And okay, now we're gonna go from sober, not somber. And in that same interview, you also mentioned turning to mushrooms to counter an alcohol problem. How does your ongoing work with plant medicine aid you in your sobriety? A topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and from my own personal experience as well. So I'm really excited to hear your perspective on this topic.
Thank you. It's complicated, but it's the dose that makes the poison is the way that I've been able to have a different relationship with sobriety. And I used to also smoke cigarettes habitually, and now I sit with tobacco. And I used to get blackout drunk, and now I lean on tequila as medicine. And so it's been really interesting. The way that mushrooms have really helped me address my alcohol problem was I knew that there was something that I was trying to get away from when I was drinking. There was a frame of reference that I feel like alcohol was helping me with. And the question that I had for myself was, what is the thing that I want to make numb? What is the thing about the social environment that is maybe overwhelming? What is this about the social environment that I do not feel comfortable in, that alcohol is going to help me be more comfortable in? And so every time I wanted to drink, I chose to microdose or sit with mushrooms instead, and got to examine. And instead of going out, I could go into these situations and environments and pinpoint, like, yeah, there's actually something about this environment that I'm not really enjoying very much, that I feel like I want to drink in order to cope with being in. So socially, alcohol was the thing that I would lean on when I like got nervous, or I was like, maybe feeling like I wasn't a decent enough or interesting enough person as I was. And what I got to learn was that the environment had more to do with me drinking than me wanting to drink. And so after I started adopting psilocybin as a teacher, I started adopting that medicine as a teacher when I was in the throes of sorority and fraternity life. I rushed a sorority in college, and found a lot of issues with the institution. But what it granted me was like a small window into seeing the alcohol culture that was being promoted. And I would be the one person like eating mushrooms and hanging out in the backyard of a giant rager and like smoking stoves and just looking at the stars. And this was before I went ceremonial with my practice, but it came recreational first. And so I would just be really sitting with, where am I? And like, why are people doing all of this? And what am I noticing about the environment? And it helped me to like attune my senses to like what was important socially in the drinking social space. And a lot of those things, even without the alcohol, are really problematic. And there was a lot of like sexual assault happening in those environments. There was a lot of blurred lines happening in those environments. There was a lot of misogyny happening in those environments, a lot of pollution, like red Solo cups are like terrible for the environment. There was a lot of aggression happening in the environment. So I am really grateful that the mushrooms actually help kind of allow me to ask the questions around what are the social implications of my drinking? What environments am I like welcoming myself to be in? And how is alcohol playing into my ability to make clear decisions? Because I was making decisions that were causing me a lot of harm. And I noticed that when I was with mushrooms, I made better choices. I made choices that considered my body. I made choices that considered my well-being. And that really surprised me. I thought maybe psilocybin would help me like not want to drink anymore. But what psilocybin and a lot of the other earth medicines allowed me to do was bring up these questions around the behavior of drinking, the social implication of my drinking, and the trauma associated with why I even wanted to drink in the first place. And for them, I'm really grateful. And there's a lot of amazing advocates right now that are doing psychedelics in recovery as a model
Mm-hmm.
and infusing the 12 step with a psychedelic recovery journey. And even I'm sure, as you know, like the creator of 12 step
Bill W.
had a relationship with LSD, and
Loved LSD.
was LSD was supposed to be a part of like the system for which all of these incredible practices, like
Yeah.
doing reconciliation work and like accepting a spiritual practice and doing all these incredible things that would just be helpful for just anyone with the assistance of an entheogen. So I also really do believe that the recovery industrial complex is also super nefarious and actually relies on people staying addicted.
That's a good jumping off point right there. It relies on people being addicted. I call it the David and Goliath model. The Goliath is your disease, and the only way you can get out of your disease is remaining abstinent. And psychedelics and LSD, even talking about Bill W. taking LSD, is an outside issue in the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. And why do I know this? Because I did 8 years of AA. And I took LSD the first year in my recovery because Bill W. told me to in a meditation that I had. And I was out at Burning Man, and guess what? Nothing happened to me. I didn't want to go drink to come down. I didn't want to go snort cocaine to get out of that space. And I like that you spoke about the compassionate inquiry of why. You asked yourself why. Like, it's a good that's a good concept to speak about, that mushrooms aren't the magic pill. They're not the panacea. They're not the magic solution to everything, but they can be catalysts to change by putting in the work and the behavioral shifts and the changes in your life if you go through that compassionate inquiry. Or, as I like to say, be the Inspector Gadget with that gigantic magnifying glass and keep going. And the rigidity of the recovery industrial complex, as you so eloquently put it, I believe will be the demise of the recovery model. And I think we're all here because we want to create alternative solutions to mental health and recovery, and that's just really my mission in this world. And we do, Medicine Box does a group call, circle, or I call it community gathering, once a week for our customers. And we just really get a lot of good work done in like a community setting. And there is a validity to AA and 12 steps, that it cast the net, right? And it pulled me to the other side, and it's pulled millions of people across the other side of the pond.
Yeah.
But it also likes to keep you there, right? It's like, okay, no, you're in the boat now, but you can't quite get off because there's a big scary world out there, right? So I'm glad that you used that magnifying glass for compassionate inquiry that branched out from self to others, to community, to the world at large. So we can keep talking about that for a long time. But another thing we embrace at Medicine Box is health sovereignty, and you do as well, particularly with regards to women and women identified care. How can mushrooms and plant medicine help them break away from the healthcare matrix? And we kind of just touched on that with the recovery kind of matrix, but let's get a little bit more niche in the work that you do around that.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest parts about like womb sovereignty practices and even the grassroots mental health movement that is really stirring up this entheogenic and is the framework for the entheogenic healing that is happening. The model is to decentralize care. And that's what's not happening within a medical matrix, is that there is a lot of consolidating of power. There's a lot of consolidating of where you can get access to medicine, consolidating where you can access services, who is responsible for allowing care, who can be a doctor, who can provide services. All of that stuff has been very much like co-opted by the United States government. it really undermines the folk system. It really undermines traditional midwifery practices. It completely like um, shifted hands of power from, especially midwifery care, from traditional midwives, and then moved it into an obstetric medical system that really didn't know anything about birth whatsoever. And we saw all kinds of incredible harms to and crimes to humanity being done in the early stages of the medical model, trying to figure out what the fuck birth is. And it still very much does not understand what birth is and how it can be treated. And it's only until recently that there's even like, space for birth attendants and space for doulas and traditional midwives to be part of the birthing practice in hospitals. And the rates of cesarean are like skyrocketing here in the States. We have so much emphasis and like dependency on surgery as part of birth. And it's not quite the emergency as the medical model would like to frame it. And I find that it's very also, there's also stranglehold around race when it comes to care in the medical system. There's still very much a gynecological model that assumes that BIPOC women don't feel the same level of pain as white women do. And the entire foundation for gynecology as a practice was born out of, at least here in the West, out of experimentation of enslaved African women in the South. So you just can't avoid that history. If you are thinking about going to a gynecologist's office or thinking about getting obstetric care, like it's with the understanding that the speculums and all of the surgical equipment that is being used was first experimented and developed on enslaved African women. And there's no ignoring any of those things. And so sorry, I get a little bit scratchy when it comes to this because it's pretty heavy shit. And I do a whole class about it called Wombs of the Empire, about, yeah, just the history of gynecological practice. And so for me and my people and the people in experiencing the entheogenic like evolution within our bodies, we're really feeling less and less safe within the Western medical framework, and very rarely ever do seek out services from like the health system unless absolutely necessary, because it doesn't really meet us where we're at as far as the needs of ourselves as BIPOC people, the needs of ourselves as femmes. There is not a lot of literacy around cross like cultural lines. There's not a lot of literacy around gender differences. And I would say in my time, coming around contraceptive measures and caring for the womb, I find a lot more education is needed on the side of gynecology in order to meet the needs of the womb, the gentle care that is required, and the touch and the gentle care that compassionate inquiry, as you said, is necessary. Anytime someone is coming in with uterine fibroids, anytime someone is coming in with endometriosis or cysts or pelvic inflammatory disease, anytime we see that kind of symptom, us as womb care practitioners do a long inquiry around their history with trauma. It's so important to like have a good understanding for what has happened in this person's life. Why are there tissues in different places? Why is there scar tissue in the vagina? Was there a history of sexual assault? Was there a history of verbal abuse in the household? And a lot of those things don't get asked or inquired about in the Western medical model because there isn't really a holistic perspective around what has affected someone emotionally might be showing up physically. So that I think all gets compounded when we talk about pregnancy release, when we talk about abortion, and we talk about the right to choose. What is right time for our bodies. And so that's why we're part of a framework of decentralizing this womb care practice, returning back to traditional midwives, returning back to parteras, sobadas, traditional womb care practices, because those are substantiated by thousands of years of knowledge and a folk medicine perspective, as opposed to my way is better than your way, and I will dominate over your way until you submit to me. And that does not seem very entheogenic or ecological at all.
Yeah, but that's amazing. I just learned all kinds of new things there. So thanks for sharing. Yeah, the Western medical system fails to recognize the many sources and problems of trauma, and over relies on fixing the maladaptive behaviors of the human and the symptoms of the human, versus when we look at the pain and the suffering and all the emotional, social, political, spiritual, psychological impact that that person may have gone through their lives. So
Yeah. It
thanks
looks
for
like we have
touching
a
on that.
questions too. I
Yeah,
don't know if you want to wait to the end or if
I have
there's
I have a kind of three more, but
okay.
I can just kind of combine it all together. And I really appreciate everyone hanging out. And I just checked all those questions too, and there's some really good ones. And
Yeah.
there's one person there, Cassandra, who signed up on my calendar. And just the other day, I just want to point out the synchronicities of this world. Is that one of her questions, or one of the answers to the question I have on my calendar is, what do you want to achieve by microdosing? And it was the question in there that I'll ask, and I'll leave that there for you. And I was like, oh, well, you know who's going to be able to answer that much better than I, Mikaela, and we're talking on Wednesday. So you should join this webcast. So we should speak to menstruation as well. And what should women know about the mushroom-menses nexus?
The Mushroom-Menses Nexus. You have like a really cool way of laying out all your terminology. Thank you for that.
Psychedelic.
It's quite,
We're
yeah.
psychedelic over here.
Yeah, and if Terrence McKenna was right about anything, it was that mushrooms absolutely do affect the yeah, the literary and the verbal and the audible and the linguistic part of who we are. And if anything, yeah, my son is definitely a testament to grandfather Terrence's perspective about linguistic development and mushroom. I wanted to answer the question that Cass had around microdosing as a safe option for children while pregnant and breastfeeding. And, I'm here to answer that question after, but I would say I've seen a lot of benefits from this practice, and especially within the linguistic areas of my son's life now after having done this practice. So, the mushroom-menses nexus. So, a lot of folks have been reporting that the ingestion of psilocybin has been having an impact on their menstrual cycles in some ways. And particularly also other entheogens too, like LSD. LSD is an emmenagogue, and also LSD is a uterine contractant. And so it can progress stalled labor, and then it can also bring on menstruation. And I notice within my own ceremonies too, leading up to ceremony tends to bring on my menstruation as well, or I will begin menstruating shortly after I take medicine and I eat mushrooms. And so what we know about psilocybin and the is that it serotonin, and so serotonin is acting on as a kind of a neurotransmitter and also affecting the hormonal system. We are using kind of the feedback loop to make an assertion about that, although there hasn't been any scientific research to show the exact relationship between mushrooms and menstruation yet. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing what is coming out of that, because we're noticing with people that are sitting with or microdosing or even macrodosing that there are decreases in like premenstrual symptoms. There is creating more regularity within menstrual cycles. We are seeing ovulation happening in a good way. And I think these are not just byproducts of the chemistry of the mushrooms, but also as we were mentioning before, the lifestyle changes that people are also making, that mushrooms might also be helping people to make, like getting off of hormonal birth control, for example. So just something for people to know, that if a person is on hormonal birth control, they are not ovulating. That's period. The whole point of synthetic birth control is to not ovulate. That is the birth control, is that there is no opportunity to ovulate. And for some people, the choice to begin mushroom journey, mushroom experiences, has everything to do with kind of like the cleaning or the wiping away of artificial ways of being. And so the use of hormonal birth control can be felt in the body sometimes. And for people eating mushrooms, sometimes they'll make the decision also to start coming off of hormonal birth control. And in that way, relationship with mushrooms becomes very, very different. Like we are eating mushrooms during different times of a cycle. We are eating mushrooms during ovulatory cycles, and that feels very, very different in the body. We are eating mushrooms premenstrual, and that is feeling very, very different in the body. And I personally ate mushrooms during my pregnancy release. So it's a big menstrual process is, to ask the menstruation to come back after having conceived. And so eating mushrooms during that experience is very valuable and beneficial to that compassionate inquiry. Why is my body or my blood feeling this way? Why is this bloating happening? Is it the food that I'm eating? It brings to question a ton of things around our practices of menstruation that I will say is part of this mycelial menstrual nexus is like, how can the mushrooms teach me to be better to my womb and therefore have a more peaceful and regular and loving relationship with my menstruation? And what we're starting to learn is the menstruation is like a fifth vital sign. And so, based on the way that a person's menstruating, how often, and what it feels like when they're menstruating, is telling us a lot about overall health. And so, it cannot be ignored. If you're a bleeding person, the menstrual cycle as an indicator of health cannot be ignored. And the mushrooms can kind of guide us towards what parts of our system, what part of our life is not serving a healthy, happy menstrual cycle, which can definitely include our experience with hormone disruptors and endocrine disruptors and chemicals in our environment. So I think the way that the mushroom guides us to live a more natural life eventually does help us address a lot of these womb issues as just a matter of as a matter of what happens downstream a little bit too.
I like what you said there about the mushroom way of life is like washing off maybe the artificial, the synthetic, the materialistic world that we've all just been conditioned to. So, again, thank you all for hanging over time here. Let's get into some questions. And I think that was, you answered that question of Cassandra's, Mikaela, about, thank you for just throwing that in and weaving it into your stream of consciousness there. So, let's see.
And if people have further questions too, there's a whole entheogenic mother's guide on my website as well. It's a PDF, it's 52 pages and covers ayahuasca, peyote, combo, cannabis, and psilocybin as far as for pregnancy, breastfeeding, and postpartum. So I would also recommend if you want to dive a little bit deeper, there's education about that specific.
Is that the Earth Medicine ebook on your
Yes.
site?
Mm-hmm.
And Alana, do you want to drop her website in the chat, please? If you could, or I don't think I have it on here, but let's get that in there. And I'm going to go through some questions and some comments. Megan Spence, currently cuddling with my sleeping 13-month-old who has the flu. I hope the little one feels better. Marilyn Pierce, the academic model is an easy way to allow psychedelics to become more, quote, medicalized, but I do not trust the academic and healthcare systems attached to all other systems can be trusted with our spirits, our souls, and our journey to heal in alignment with self homeostasis. Is the risk of this harm worth the movement toward normalization? I have concerns. I think it's a very valid concern, and it is a very, very double-edged sword in a lot of ways. I don't know if you have anything to speak towards that, Mikaela, but I feel we covered a lot of that in the conversation. Catalina, what's the youngest age we can give psilocybin to our kids. And then she wrote microdose. I've seen my friend's son eat peyote before, and he was 2 years old. So
yeah, I think that's culturally specific. But my son has already microdosed before. He his first microdose at 6 months old, and he was totally fine and safe and was well held in my arms through his journey and experience. And I just see nothing but brightness and beauty and intelligence in my kids. So it really does depend. And in some traditional communities, the intentional sitting with the medicine would start at about 3 is usually when mid doses would start to happen. Maybe, yeah, micros to mids.
fine-tuned neural pathways.
He's doing okay, you guys. He's still here. We're gonna see the whole generation of mushroom kids in like the next 20 years.
Be like,
and I'm so here for it.
The dentists do a funny skit on that with all like the mushroom children's like names and everything, like all these like
no, I haven't seen that one.
Sage Galactica, like Indigo, like all these like crazy funny
so
names.
Extra.
Nature is magic, and children understand that to the deepest level. I am a child, 43-year-old child, and I understand. I just love nature. That's why I live. I'm staring at mountains, and there's snows, and there's big trees all around me right now.
Yeah. Really.
Cassandra, awesome. I'm glad you got value out of this. Cassandra, thanks for joining. Felicia, there's research in the conventional medical system that shows women with a history of physical and sexual abuse have more gynecological diseases. Your biography becomes your biology. You touched on that, Mikaela. I'm pretty sure.
I think she said that like right after I said that as like confirmation, and it's super true. Yeah.
Megan, my OB explained how the RH vaccine was tested on imprisoned Black men. My doula made the biggest difference in my delivery. Where can I follow you on socials? I love these subjects. Yeah, Mikaela, how about right now, before I get into like our medicine box offering and what we do, like we really want to like, this is you. So socials, contact, how do these amazing people in the chat here get a hold of you or follow you, or do you have calendars that you do consults with? Like what's up with that?
Thank you. So I have a regular platform that I love to share on. My Instagram is Mama de la Myco, Mama Della Myco. And yeah, that's a really great space. I do drop a lot on there. Also, Mama Della Myco is my TikTok account too. We're about to crack 200K on there, which I'm very excited for. But there's a lot of censorship on there, so I don't talk so like overtly about everything that I care about on there, just because I get flagged all the time. So you might find like my more edgy content on Instagram. And my website is mushroom.love. I do seasonal circle sits. They're about 15 people each. I have a really amazing ceremony team, and we journey 4 times a year in different parts of the United States. And I do have an online shop where I do help people get in line with womb sovereignty care materials like emetagogues. I also have Nature's Plant B. It's a Queen Anne's Lace tincture. I make 5 gallons of that a year, and I'm about to drop it on my shop pretty soon. So there's a lot of materials as far as education goes, but there's physical, tangible things that I love to create for my community too. So yeah, thank you so much.
Mikaela, just all types of things happen. It's amazing. Julie, I just wanted to read this. Deeply appreciate you touching on the misogyny and racism inherent in current repro health services. I'm a nurse, midwife, and caught babies for 14 years. Now work as a cannabis NP, and thrilled to hear all your thoughts. I love it when there's this type of human and on these conversations that are like from maybe the old paradigm and have shifted and can understand and get their own belief systems changed and their ideologies, and they're aligning. It's just the alchemy happening. Dennis, let's do it. Mushroom babies. Um, Dennis, you got any questions for us, man? You got something up there, don't you? Amy, team member at Medicine Box, your work is refreshing. I have a 4-year-old little girl. Shifting this energy is huge. Thank you. Awesome. I have, let's see, I always ask a question to my guests. And it's usually just improvised. The one favorite, if you could pinpoint the moving target, your favorite reasoning for doing the work that you do?
Oh my goodness. There's an old African proverb that says, each one teach one. That means if you learn something good, you got something that is your responsibility to share with somebody else. And for me, like I've found like nothing but help and care and alignment, and that I'm sharing just like this, that I'm storytelling, that I'm like giving what I know to people, and that like my life keeps getting better. I think it's a little bit of the wounded healer archetype, a little bit, you know, like I got well and I didn't start getting better until I started helping others. And so you know, I really feel like that proverb does such a beautiful way of like sustaining the human family. It's like you learn something, it is our responsibility to share this knowledge. And so, you know, if it wasn't for my many teachers, I would not be where I am. And so I seek to just be able to share what I know so that other people can grow. And that gives me a lot of life. And I think it's just within my nature to want to be sharing. And I'm a Leo, and so I love talking, and so I might as well talk about something good. So it keeps me going. And I also was an English major when I was in college. And when I first got to school, I really wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a doctor my entire life. I wanted to, in my words, I want to help people. I want to heal people. And I got into biology, was not fucking with that shit. And I ended up an English major. But I always knew, I was like, I still want to talk about wellness. I still really want to use my skills as a writer to be able to share good things with people to help them with their life. And I found this body of knowledge that I call the mushroom consciousness. And now I use my skills as a writer and as an orator to be able to disseminate that knowledge. And I think that's part of my mission here on the planet. So grateful to be able to do it, and grateful to be able to do it with cool people like you. So thank you for allowing me to, yeah, fulfill my life's purpose by just being here and sharing what I know.
Yeah. Thank you, Mikaela. It's very inspirational to have you here. I always learn a lot when I have these conversations. It's part of the reason why I love doing this, and I love spreading education and awareness on things that really matter, and getting multiple different perspectives. And that's really what it's all about, is shifting one perspective at a time, gradually over time, frequency and consistency, and multiplied by intention plus introspection equals transformation. That's kind of the formula that I like to use. And for everyone here, I really hope that you all enjoyed yourselves and learned a lot. And Alana dropped my calendar link in the chat if anyone ever wants to have a 30-minute conversation with me. I would say if it is about any of the topics that Mikaela covered, get with her. Clearly, I am a man, and I'm a white man, and I have my own perspectives. And again, that's why it's nice to have people that are in their zone of genius. And Mikaela, you are in your zone of genius, and keep up the great work. And I hope to meet you in person at some time, and stay in touch, and let us know if there's anything that we can assist you with along the way, and promote your work, and get the good word out there, and continue raising that amazing little human of yours, and that psychedelic, literate, and collective mental health community that you've built around him.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to meet you, and so nice to also meet this beautiful audience of people, and these attendees also have incredible
Y'all are
stories
awesome.
too.
Thank you
Y'all
for
are
all your
super
questions. Appreciate it.
amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brian. You are more than just a white guy. You are also a
I'm
medicine
making fun of
holder
myself.
yourself. I
Yeah.
love it. No, it's great. And I
Wounded,
hope you got
definitely that wounded healer, like, and I wanted to riff on the AA thing real quick.
yeah.
Like, I 100% saved my life. AA saved my
Mm,
life, but I didn't want to get into that tangent in the weeds. But um, when I was going in there, I was taking psychedelics. I was started to meditate more and prayer, and really developed my like spiritual practice and like this abundant spiritual way of living. And I used to go and say, "Hi, I'm Brian. I'm an alcoholic addict."
mm.
I can like exhale now, like, I'm surrendering. And then I started to like say
Mm,
that, and it didn't feel good in my body. It was like one of the maybe the first times that I actually started to like feel a certain way in my body and not up here in the content. And I was like, this doesn't feel right. That I'm like continuously identifying
yes.
with a disease. And it's like, well, I used to be an addict, and I used to drink a lot, and I know I'll never touch a drop of alcohol ever again in my life. I just can't. And I have much respect for alcohol, and I have much respect for all drugs, and I feel all drugs should be legalized, and we just need to learn
Mm,
how to come at it from a place of harm reduction and understand it versus trying to always be like the one that's understood about it. And I always like to say that addicts are humans too,
yes.
and it's a very misunderstood. I did some writing on it today that addiction is a very irrational and mysterious phenomenon. It's like a kaleidoscope, and we got to shake it, shake it, shake it to understand like all the cosmic debris of addiction. And it's just the tip of the iceberg that you touched on. So keep spreading that journey as well. And I'm so happy to hear that
Mm,
the way you came through your into your sobriety, or whatever you want to call it, right, from that compassionate inquiry. Not many people do that, and not many people are able to go in and get into the roots
mm.
of that. I call it a phenomenon, because it really is. It's a phenomenon.
Yeah.
Like, why don't you drink anymore? Because you do not want to see me drinking. Trust me, you just don't. Like, blackout drinker, waking up, this is not my ceiling syndrome, right? Waking up in the hospital, a couple of ODs, just, you know, humbled,
Humbled.
so humbled by it. And I can tell that you are too. So
Yeah. I
yeah,
think the first time I ever made it into the ER for an overdose was on morphine when I was 13 years old.
mm,
And I've been toying with my consciousness for a long time, and I feel like these medicines allow me to explore and to feel like good and to go into spaces that I feel are really enjoyable, and that same desire to feel and the same desire to be different and the same desire to um explore, expand, go in, like be somewhere is not different. The curiosity of the addict, I think, is still very much there, and I think that's okay. I think that's part of the human condition, is like
mm-hmm,
we're explorative and curious
mm-hmm,
beings. And I really feel that asking, like you said, that compassionate inquiry question, and all the work that Gabor Mate is doing around
yeah,
situating what
he
addiction is,
is.
that it's not like that, maybe it's not even a disease, that
It's
maybe
not.
it's not even biochemical, that it is conditional and behavioral and has a lot to do with trauma. And I'm so happy to see that the world is like really
Mm-hmm,
opening up to the idea that, yeah, I love what your attendee said, that your biography is your biology. I think that's a great
mm.
place to leave people. So
Or
thank
yeah,
you.
like Gabor Mate says that we can't reduce humans to just their neurochemistry. And like, if this was my brain, our brains don't develop outside of our emotions or our life experiences. And it's when you can start doing some processing around that, it's not reductionist. Addiction
Mhm. Yeah.
isn't. So
Thank you.
Bless your heart so much.
Yeah, super
Yes.
appreciate you. And
Okay.
happy to heal in community too. I think that's also a thing as well, as like we are
Amazing.
not healing in a vacuum anymore. We've
Yep.
turned me to we. So thank you for being part of the we. I
You
appreciate
bet. Cheers. Capital W, capital E.
it.
Adios,
Have a good
everybody.
day.
Blessings. Bye.
Bye.